If you do not find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. People treat that line like a motivational poster. I do not. I treat it like a balance sheet warning. And I want to push that warning through the lens of dependency, because that is where most people miss the danger. Most working people think they are building security. What they are often building is a prettier of dependence. They sell time, receive a paycheck, feel relief for 2 days, and then repeat the same cycle with the same vulnerability. That cycle looks respectable in Dallas, in New York, in Omaha, and almost everywhere else. But the math under it does not become better just because the routine is common. The central mistake is not effort. Effort is valuable. The mistake is effort without an ownership destination. If your labor never graduates into assets, you stay trapped inside borrowed certainty. You can earn more and still remain fragile. You can receive promotions and still own nothing that works without you. As an employee, your inventory is time. You wake up with 24 hours, and only a slice of those hours can be sold. That is why I keep returning to the image of dependency. The shelf is finite. Once the day is sold, it is gone forever. No matter how talented you are, the machine shuts off when you stop moving. People argue with that by pointing to high earners. They say a doctor can bill more, a lawyer can bill more, a consultant can bill more. I do not disagree. I am saying the model is still labor. A higher price per HR is still a ceiling if the hour remains the unit of production. You can become an expensive prisoner without becoming a free person. That is why I think the phrase employee trap is accurate. A trap does not need to feel miserable to be a trap. It only needs to keep you dependent on repeating the same motion for the same source of oxygen. If the income dies the moment your labor stops, you are not wealthy yet, no matter how polished the office looks or how impressive the title sounds. The emotional danger is that the trap is dressed as adulthood. You are praised for consistency. You are praised for reliability. You are praised for endurance. Meanwhile, the deeper question is rarely asked, what part of your current effort is becoming an asset, and what part is simply feeding the next payroll cycle? The school system makes this worse because it trains behavior before it trains judgment. Children are taught punctuality, obedience, memorization, and the ability to sit still in rows. Those are excellent traits if the goal is to feed organizations with compliant labor. They are not the first traits I would teach if the goal were ownership, independence, and capital allocation. Notice what rarely gets taught with equal seriousness: how to read a cash flow statement, how to think in terms of acquisition costs and lifetime value, how to turn skill into distribution, how equity outruns wages over long periods, how tax structure rewards one type of behavior and punishes another. I am not saying formal education has no value. I am saying most people leave the system fluent in earning and nearly illiterate in owning. That is how the salary addiction pipeline stays full. Society gets excellent workers who never develop an owner's operating system. Then the person enters adulthood with a map that ends at salary. He becomes more polished, more certified, more employable, but not necessarily more free. If the map is wrong, greater speed just gets him to the wrong destination faster. That is why intelligence alone does not rescue people from the trap. The paycheck itself creates a psychological loop that is stronger than most people admit. It is not just money. It is relief, validation, rhythm, and proof that the month did not beat you. That is why I call it monthly dopamine. The body learns to celebrate the deposit while ignoring the structure that made the deposit necessary. Once that loop is formed, people stop evaluating their life by net freedom and start evaluating it by whether the next deposit still arrives on time. That is how dependency becomes normalized. The same person who would call a supplier concentration risky in business will tolerate total income concentration in his own life. A paycheck feels safe because it is visible and recurring, but visibility is not the same thing as durability. If all your certainty comes from one external payer, your life is sturdy only while that payer stays generous. The deeper structure underneath the paycheck may still be borrowed certainty, which means the comfort is real, but the resilience is weak. That is why some people keep working long after the financial gap has narrowed. They are not only chasing money, they are defending the emotional architecture that the paycheck created. To them, retirement feels less like freedom and more like the loss of a narcotic rhythm. This takes us to the difference between linear effort and exponential outcome. Most labor is linear. You work an hour, you get paid for an hour. You work more hours, you get paid more. That seems natural because that is how nearly everyone around you lives. But natural is not the same thing as wealth creating when the objective is freedom. Wealth at scale tends to come from ownership structures where effort and outcome separate. You put in intelligent effort early, then the asset continues to produce beyond the hour you personally spent. That is the logic of equity, royalties, scalable software, distribution systems, and productive capital. It is the reason the salary addiction conversation cannot stop at salary. I am not telling people to despise work. I am telling them to ask what their work becomes. If work becomes only consumption and bills, it dies each month. If work becomes ownership, it recruits compounding. The entire distance between linear stress and borrowed certainty is usually contained in that conversion. The difficult part is psychological. Linear systems reward immediate effort. Exponential systems require patience, delayed certainty, and often embarrassment in the early stage. That is why so few people build them. They would rather receive a predictable reward from a visible boss than an uncertain reward from an asset that is not mature yet. Society makes the trap harder to escape because it rewards appearances that are often anti-wealth. Busyness is treated as virtue. Exhaustion is treated as seriousness. The person wearing the monthly dopamine of constant work gets social credit, even if his financial structure is weak. I have noticed that many employees are more afraid of looking idle than of being dependent. That is a terrible hierarchy of fears. If the crowd applauds your captivity, the applause is still not freedom. It is only social perfume sprayed over fragility. Promotions play into this beautifully. A promotion often increases status, income, and self-respect, but it can also increase dependence on the very machine you should be learning to exit. More meetings, more politics, more golden handcuffs, more lifestyle inflation, more ego investment in the title. The cage becomes premium grade. That is why I distrust the outer scorecard. Titles and applause are easy to fake as success. The inner scorecard asks a crueler question. If you stopped this machine tomorrow, what would still belong to you and continue producing? An owner's operating system begins with a different question. Not how can I earn more next month, but how can I build something that continues without my continuous physical presence? That one shift changes every downstream decision. It changes how you spend evenings, how you think about weekends, and how you convert cash flow into false security. Owners look for leverage. Leverage is not always debt. It is code, systems, brand, distribution, teams, equity, licensing, and media that can move farther than one body can move. Employees are usually trained to become more valuable personally. Owners are trained to build structures that are valuable independently. That is why the Saturday morning CEO idea matters. Your job can fund the bridge, but your off-hours must begin building the exit. Weekends are not only for recovery if freedom is the goal. They are also for architecture. That architecture is how you escape dependency and create something with runway. The first stage is often embarrassingly small. A tiny acquisition, a service with one client, a media channel with little reach, an investment discipline that looks boring. People dismiss the small stage because it does not yet feel like freedom. They miss that every large system once looked unimpressive at the start. An exit strategy should exist long before you are desperate for one. That is true in business, and it is true in personal finance. The person who waits until burnout to think about freedom will almost always make emotional decisions from a weak position. The person who builds the exit while still stable has options. This means you should know your enough number, your freedom timeline, your debt policy, your asset acquisition policy, and your skill conversion policy. You should know what cash flow stays labor-based, what cash flow begins to assetize, and what habits need to die for the transition to happen. A lot of people want freedom and still spend as if they are committed to dependence. Expensive cars, oversized housing, status spending, and identity purchases make the exit slower, because every new liability hires your future labor in advance. If you want escape velocity, you cannot keep adding weight to the rocket. That is why austerity is often misunderstood. The point is not misery. The point is strategic force. Every spared dollar can become a worker that labors for you later, instead of a servant you must feed forever. I want to end where every serious money discussion should end, with old age and honesty. Imagine yourself at 90, sitting quietly, with no title left to hide inside. Would you be proud that you optimized the outer scorecard, or would you wish you had built the inner one sooner? The rocking chair test strips away excuses. 890, no one cares how busy your calendar looked at 47. No one cares how many meetings you survived. What matters is whether you used your years to build freedom or whether you sold irreplaceable inventory and called the sale maturity. That is why I am not telling people to quit in a burst of fantasy. I am telling them to stop worshiping the model that keeps them dependent. Use your current salary as fuel if you must, but treat it as bridge capital, not as the destination. Then convert labor into ownership until the machine can keep moving while you sleep. When you judge the decision later, judge it by this standard. Did you stop selling the one asset you could never replenish without building anything that could outlive the sale? Or did you convert effort into an engine that gave you back time? That is the only ending that interests me. If I were translating this into action, I would start very simply. Audit every dollar of lifestyle inflation that keeps you tied to labor. Choose one asset path you can understand, commit a fixed percentage of cash flow to ownership instead of random consumption. Build one small system outside the job and protect it with seriousness. Then I would watch behavior, not slogans. Do you spend weekends constructing the exit or anesthetizing the stress of dependence? Do you use raises to accelerate freedom or to decorate the cage? Do you buy applause or do you buy leverage? The answers to those questions say more about your future than your current title ever will. That is why this is not a motivational speech for me. It is a design problem. You can remain an employee in body while beginning to think like an owner in mind. And once the mind changes, the calendar, the money, and the life start to change with it. Now let us move to the tax layer, because this is where the game stops being philosophical and becomes brutally mechanical. If you work for wages, the government stands in front of the cash flow with open hands. You pay before the money becomes fully yours. That is what I mean by tax drag. The laborer enters the system already leaking. Let me bring this down from theory to a person. Denise from Dallas worked as a hospital administrator. From the outside, the career looked successful. Good income, stable trajectory, respectable title, and the kind of life people call solid. But the inner math was all employee trap. The money arrived because the body kept showing up. Denise kept telling himself that one more promotion would create breathing room. What it actually created was more dependence on the machine, more lifestyle commitments, and more ego tied to the title. The income improved faster than the freedom did. That is one of the cruel jokes of the system. Many people are promoted deeper into captivity. The turning point came when the household finally listed every asset that would still work if employment stopped tomorrow. The list was shorter than expected. The savings were real, but the systems were thin. There was not enough ownership, not enough independent cash flow, and not enough designed optionality. That inventory check changed the conversation overnight. What followed was not a fantasy leap. It was a methodical conversion. Debt was reduced. Consumption was trimmed. Weekend hours were redirected. A small ownership base was built and then expanded. That is how borrowed certainty starts in the real world. Not with drama, but with reallocation. That case matters because it shows the bridge principle clearly. The salary can fund the escape if you stop treating the salary as the destination. Use labor to buy assets, use assets to buy time, then use time to think more clearly and build better assets. That loop is the opposite of the worker loop. Most people never complete that conversion because they remain loyal to the wrong scoreboard. The scoreboard says promotion, bigger salary, nicer symbols. The better scoreboard says freedom, optionality, ownership, and the ability to let a Tuesday morning belong to you. I trust the second scoreboard because it survives the rocking chair test, and the first one does not. Owners do not always avoid tax. What they often gain is timing, structure, and optionality. Timing matters because money kept longer compounds longer. Structure matters because not all income is taxed in the same order or at the same rate. Optionality matters because the owner can decide when and how value is realized. The wage earner has very little of that power. He receives labor income on someone else's schedule, inside someone else's reporting system, with someone else's definitions of compensation. This is why I describe the arrangement as monthly dopamine for workers and a planning advantage for owners. The two scorecards do not reward the same behavior. By the time many employees notice this, they have already spent decades maximizing salary instead of building assets that change the tax game. They were running harder inside the wrong lane. A bigger gross number made them feel stronger while the net structure remained fragile. Inflation adds another quiet cruelty to the worker model. Wages move by negotiation cycles, review cycles, and budget approvals. Prices move whenever the market allows them to move. That is why I call inflation a monthly dopamine. The worker fights with a calendar while prices move with no calendar at all. Most households experience this not as an abstract economic theory, but as exhaustion. Groceries rise, insurance rises, housing rises, medical costs rise. Meanwhile, the raise feels larger on paper than it feels in life because the raise is taxable and the prices are relentless. Owners with productive assets at least have a path into the upside of price movement. Businesses can reprice, equity can revalue, real assets can adjust. The employee whose entire identity is salary receives inflation mainly as a shrinking of dignity and room to breathe. That is why a life built only on wages is always more fragile than it first appears. The person thinks he is standing still. In reality, he is often walking uphill on a slope he does not control.